conflict resolution. First, let's review the three main types of conflict: man versus man, man versus nature, and man versus self. Man versus man is going to be when the main character has a conflict with another character. Man versus nature is going to be when man has a conflict with nature. Maybe he's trapped on an island and can't get off. Maybe he's waiting out a storm, but there's some natural element that's up against the main character. And man versus self is when the character has a conflict within him or herself. Maybe they have to decide morally what's right and wrong and come to some conclusion or some definite truth within themselves. So, let's remember that these two conflicts are external conflicts. That means the main character is having a conflict with something outside of themselves. And man versus self is an internal conflict. It's something within man, within the main character, that has to be taken care of. The conflict is inside. There's nothing outside that's causing the conflict. Now, outside factors may influence how the conflict is resolved, but the character is, in the end, having the conflict internally. So let's talk about how each one of these are resolved. Man versus man is resolved when the two parties come to some sort of agreement. So maybe the main character and whoever the conflict was with decide to go with one person's idea or the other person's, or maybe they decide to compromise, but they come to some sort of agreement and their conflict is resolved. With man versus nature, it's usually resolved by man discovering something about some aspect of nature. So maybe they come to an understanding that they're not going to be able to fight nature. Nature's always going to win. Or maybe they come to the understanding that if you just go with the flow, nature will take care of you and everything will work out. It's going to depend on the story, how you're going to interpret the resolution, but usually man discovers something about some aspect of nature. They come to an understanding. And with man versus self, it's usually resolved by the character growing. This is like mentally or emotionally growing, or coming to an understanding about some part of him or herself. So the character either grows and says, oh, I can do this thing I didn't think I could do, that I was struggling with. Or they come to an understanding about a part of themselves. They make their moral decision that they were struggling with, and they either decide, oh, I'm going to make the good decision, and they find out they're a good person. Or in some stories, they make the bad decision and decide, you know what, I'm really a bad person at heart. I'm going to do what the evil person would do. I'm going to take that path. And some characters aren't always the good guys. So that is what happens with some man versus self conflicts. So whenever you are trying to figure out what the conflict in a story is and how it's going to be resolved, first figure out if it's a man versus man, man versus nature, or man versus self conflict, and then you can figure out how it will most likely be resolved.